3 words. That was all it took to dismantle a billion-dollar empire and ignite the scandal that would define a generation. Most people believe fairy tales begin with a kiss, with champagne toasts and declarations under starlight. But this story began in the shadows, with whispered betrayal and the kind of cold calculation that could stop a heart mid-beat. Claire Morgan was not looking for a prince. She was not dreaming of ballrooms or designer gowns. She was trying to keep her mother alive, one dinner shift at a time, serving $500 steaks to people who would not look her in the eye. But on a rain-soaked Tuesday in November, she overheard a conversation meant for the darkness. And in that moment, she faced a choice that would cost her everything before it gave her the world. This is the story of how an invisible waitress saved a tycoon from the viper in his bed. This is the story of how she became the queen of his empire. But first, she had to learn to run barefoot through the storm. 2 weeks earlier, the Crimson Room existed in that rarefied space where old money and new power intersected over plates of edible gold and glasses of wine older than most marriages. The air smelled of truffle oil, aged leather, and the particular desperation that came with maintaining appearances. For Claire Morgan, it was simply the place where her feet ached in rhythm with the ambient jazz, where her smile was currency, and where being invisible was the only way to survive. She was 24 years old, with eyes the color of autumn leaves and hair that refused to cooperate with the restaurant's strict grooming standards. Every morning before her shift, she would stand in front of the cracked mirror in her queen's apartment and wrestle that unruly brown hair into submission, twisting it into a bun that lasted maybe 3 hours before strands began their escape. The manager, Gerald Patterson, never failed to notice. It was a cold Tuesday morning when she arrived at the Crimson Room through the service entrance, as staff were required to do. The November wind cut through her thin jacket like a promise of harder times ahead. She was already exhausted, having spent the previous evening at the hospital with her mother, watching chemotherapy drip into tired veins, counting the minutes until the next bill arrived. Gerald was waiting in the prep area, his face the color of undercooked beef, his eyes scanning the servers with the enthusiasm of a man inspecting livestock. "Morgan," he barked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Your hair is a disaster. Fix it. We serve elites here, not vagrants." Claire felt the familiar burn of humiliation rise in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She had become an expert at swallowing things: anger, pride, fear, hunger. She nodded once and retreated to the staff bathroom, where she stared at her reflection and thought about all the ways invisibility could be a blessing. Furniture does not complain. Furniture does not cry. Furniture does not get fired. And she needed this job more than she needed dignity. The lunch shift passed in a blur of polished silverware and forced smiles. The Crimson Room's clientele moved through the space like sharks in expensive suits, their laughter sharp, their demands absolute. Claire poured water, delivered plates, cleared tables, all while maintaining the perfect distance that the job required, close enough to anticipate needs, far enough away to remain unseen. During her break, which consisted of 15 minutes in the alley behind the kitchen, she checked her phone. One voicemail. Her stomach tightened before she even pressed play. The voice was professional, distant, efficient. "Ms. Morgan, this is Mercy General Hospital calling regarding your mother's treatment schedule. The next chemotherapy cycle is scheduled for Friday, but we need to confirm payment for the copay. The amount due is $3,200. Without payment confirmation, we will unfortunately need to postpone treatment. Please call us back at your earliest convenience." Claire stared at the cracked concrete beneath her feet, at the cigarette butts and grease stains that decorated this forgotten corner of Manhattan. She opened her banking app with fingers that had learned not to shake. The number glowed on the screen, $734.56. The math was simple and devastating. Rent was due in 8 days, $1,350. The hospital wanted $3,200. Groceries, subway fare, the phone bill that was already overdue. The numbers did not add up. They never added up. But somehow she had kept the equation balanced for 6 years, ever since her mother's diagnosis, ever since the world had narrowed to this brutal calculus of survival. She allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to close her eyes and breathe, to imagine a different life where money was not a constant scream in the back of her mind. Then she opened her eyes, wiped her face, and went back inside. Because that was what you did. You kept moving. The evening shift brought a different energy to the Crimson Room. The lunch crowd was all business deals and power lunches. But dinner was theater. It was performance. It was where fortunes changed hands over dessert wine and cigar smoke. Gerald found her as she was adjusting her apron, checking to make sure her shirt was tucked in properly, that her shoes were clean enough to pass inspection. "Morgan, you're on booth 9 tonight." Her head snapped up. Booth 9, the VIP section, the private alcove behind the burgundy curtain where senators hid from cameras and CEOs made deals that shaped cities. "The guests are high profile," Gerald continued, his voice carrying that particular warning tone she had learned to recognize. "Politicians, business leaders, do not embarrass me. Do not speak unless spoken to. Be invisible." She nodded. Invisible. That she could do. That was her specialty. At 8:15 that evening, with the rain drumming against the windows hard enough to make the glass weep, Claire approached booth 9 carrying a bottle of San Pellegrino. The burgundy curtain was drawn, creating a pocket of privacy in the midst of the crowded dining room. She could hear voices inside, low, urgent. She should have announced her presence immediately, should have cleared her throat, made some small sound to alert the guests that she was there. But something in the tone stopped her, something sharp and dangerous that made the hair on her arms stand up. So she froze just outside the curtain, the bottle cold in her hands, her heart suddenly loud in her ears. The woman's voice came first, smooth as expensive silk, cold as November rain. "The board is getting cold feet, Vincent. If Ethan does not sign the amended prenup by Friday, the merger timeline collapses. We need that access." Claire's breath caught. Ethan. Ethan Blackwell. She knew that name. Everyone in the service industry knew that name. His photograph hung in the front hallway of the Crimson Room, right beside the manager's office. A man in a tuxedo with tired eyes and a caption that read, "Ethan Blackwell, benefactor, Mercy General Oncology Wing." The same wing where her mother was fighting for her life. A man's voice responded, lower, more measured. "Relax, Natasha. He's completely under my control. The man is desperate for family, or for legacy. You are giving him the illusion of everything he wants." But what if he suspects? Ethan did not build Blackwell Enterprises by being naive. A pause, then the man again, his voice carrying a smile that made Claire's skin crawl. He built it trying to prove something to his bastard father. That is, his weakness. He needs to believe he is better than William Blackwell. He needs to believe in true love. And you, my dear, are very convincing. Claire pressed her back against the wall, the bottle trembling in her grip. She should walk away. She should forget what she was hearing. But her feet would not move. "Walk me through the end game again," the man said. Vincent. His name was Vincent. Simple. Natasha's voice was matter of fact, like she was discussing stock prices instead of destruction. "Wedding is Sunday. The prenup gives me access to voting rights within the corporate trust. By Monday, we transfer key assets to shell companies in the Caymans. Tuesday, we short the stock through your offshore accounts. Wednesday, Blackwell Enterprises collapses. Stock goes from $340 per share to $12. And Ethan." A pause. So brief, Claire almost missed it. But in that silence, she heard something that might have been regret, might have been conscience. But then Natasha spoke again, and whatever humanity had flickered there was gone. "Ethan will be left with a bankrupt company and a broken heart. He is too emotional. My projection is breakdown within 6 months, possibly substance abuse. He will not recover." "You almost sound like you care." "I do not. I learned from the best never to care. Now let us toast to the Blackwell fortune becoming the Sterling fortune." The sound of crystal clinking cut through Claire like a blade. She backed away slowly, carefully, her entire body shaking. She made it to the service station before her knees threatened to give out. She set the bottle down with hands that would not stop trembling and stared at the wall, at that photograph of Ethan Blackwell. Those tired eyes, that careful smile. A good man, everyone said. Ethical, principled. The kind of CEO who actually cared about his employees, who built hospitals for strangers, who tried to make capitalism humane. And two people were planning to destroy him for profit. Claire looked down at her apron, at the order pad in her pocket. She thought about her bank account, about her mother's treatment, about the eviction notice that was probably waiting in her mailbox. She thought about all the ways speaking up could end her. Then she thought about Ethan Blackwell's tired eyes, about the hospital wing that carried his name, about the fact that good people were rare enough to be worth protecting, even at terrible cost. She pulled out her order pad and began to write. That night, Claire did not sleep. She lay in her studio apartment listening to the rain hammer her window, to the sirens wail through Queens, to her neighbor's television bleeding through the thin walls. Her phone sat on the floor beside her mattress. The hospital's voicemail still waiting for a response she could not give. Friday was 3 days away. 3 days until Ethan Blackwell signed his life away to a woman who saw him as nothing more than a bank account to drain. 3 days to decide if she was brave enough or foolish enough to intervene. The memories came unbidden. She was 9 years old, watching her father pack a suitcase on Christmas morning, watching him walk out the door without looking back. Her mother had held her close and whispered words that Claire had never forgotten. Sometimes doing the right thing means you suffer first, baby. But you can live with yourself. That matters more than comfort. That matters more than safety. Her father died 3 years later in a construction accident, drunk on the job, alone. Claire never learned if he could live with himself, but she remembered those words. She had carried them through every impossible choice, through every moment when survival demanded compromise. And now, lying in the dark, she made her decision. Thursday morning, Claire went to the Queen's Public Library. The free Wi-Fi was spotty, but it was better than nothing. She searched for Ethan Blackwell on the ancient desktop computer, scrolling through articles and interviews, piecing together the story of a man she had never met but somehow felt she understood. He had built Blackwell Enterprises from a $50,000 loan at age 26. He was 38 now, and his company was worth billions. But the articles painted a picture more complex than simple success. They told the story of a man trying to redeem a family name, trying to prove that business did not require bloodshed. His father, William Blackwell, had been a corporate raider. Ruthless, infamous, the kind of man who destroyed competitors for sport and called it capitalism. But Ethan had publicly rejected that legacy. In interview after interview, he spoke about ethical business practices, about creating value without causing harm. One quote caught Claire's attention. It was from a TED Talk he had given 2 years earlier. "My father taught me that the world is a battlefield, that business is war, that the strong devour the weak and call it natural selection. But I refuse to accept that paradigm. Legacy is not what you take from the world, it is what you give. And I would rather build one thing that helps people than destroy 1,000 things for profit." Claire stared at those words until they blurred. Here was a man trying to be good in a world that rewarded cruelty, trying to prove that kindness was not weakness. And Natasha Sterling had seen that idealism, that hunger for connection, and she had weaponized it. Claire closed the browser and sat in the humming silence of the library. She pulled out her order pad and looked at what she had written the night before. "She is not who you think she is. Security footage, booth 9, Tuesday, 8:20 p.m. Do not sign the prenup. You are walking into a trap. Someone who sees what others ignore." 29 words. That was all it took to either save a life or destroy her own. She folded the note into a tiny square and slipped it into her pocket. Tonight was Ethan Blackwell's birthday celebration at the Crimson Room. Tonight, she would either find the courage to throw the grenade or spend the rest of her life wondering what if. The Crimson Room had been transformed. Every table filled, every surface gleaming. The entire restaurant had been reserved for Ethan Blackwell's 38th birthday, and the guest list read like a directory of American power. Senators, tech moguls, hedge fund managers, celebrity entrepreneurs, people whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small nations. Claire stood in the prep area, adjusting her apron for the 10th time, trying to control the panic rising in her throat. Gerald had assigned her to the head table, the highest stakes, the most scrutiny. One mistake and she was done. She watched through the service entrance as the guests arrived. Designer suits, couture gowns, jewelry that cost more than her annual salary. And in the center of it all, Ethan Blackwell. He looked different than his photograph, taller, broader in the shoulders, but somehow diminished by the weight he carried. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. But his eyes remained distant, like a man performing a role he had long since tired of. Beside him, radiant in crimson silk, was Natasha Sterling. She played the part flawlessly, attentive, loving, her hand on his arm, her laugh perfectly timed. To anyone watching, they were the golden couple, the fairy tale, the proof that success and happiness could coexist. But Claire knew the truth. She had heard the Viper's voice planning the bite. At 9:30, dessert service began. Claire carried the tray of espresso cups with hands that had finally stopped shaking. She had made her choice. The note was folded under one of the saucers, small enough to miss unless you were looking, impossible to ignore once found. She approached Ethan's right side, her movements smooth and practiced. Years of invisibility had taught her how to move through space without disturbing it. "Your espresso, Mr. Blackwell." He looked up. Their eyes met. And in that brief moment, Claire saw what the cameras never captured. She saw loneliness. She saw exhaustion. She saw a man surrounded by hundreds of people and utterly, completely alone. "Thank you," he said softly. "That is very kind." Most of the guests treated servers like mobile furniture, but Ethan Blackwell saw her, actually saw her. And that small kindness broke something loose in Claire's chest. She lowered the cup, slid the note beneath the saucer with a movement so subtle it might have been accidental. Then she stepped back into the shadows and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Ethan was engaged in conversation with a senator, his espresso untouched. 15 minutes. 20. Natasha stood, smoothing her gown. "Darling, the car is here. We have the after party at the plaza." Ethan raised a hand. "One moment. I need the caffeine." Claire's heart stopped. He reached for the cup, lifted it, and there, stark against the dark ceramic, was a small white square of paper. His brow furrowed. He picked it up, unfolded it with careful fingers. Read. Claire watched his face change, watched his jaw tighten, watched his eyes scan the room, searching not for guests, but for staff. And then his gaze found her, locked on her with an intensity that felt like standing in front of headlights. For 3 seconds, the world narrowed to just the two of them. She could not look away. She sent every ounce of silent pleading through that connection. "Believe me, trust me, I am telling the truth." But then Natasha leaned over his shoulder, her smile still in place, but her eyes sharp as broken glass. "What is that, darling? A love note from an admirer?" Before Ethan could respond, she plucked the note from his fingers. "Read it." And Claire watched the color drain from beneath her perfect makeup, watched recognition flash across her face. The waitress, the one who had served booth 9 on Tuesday. Natasha's hand closed into a fist, crumpling the paper. Her laugh was bright and brittle. "Oh my God, honestly, the staff here is so inappropriate, soliciting tips with conspiracy theories." Ethan's voice dropped an octave. "Let me see that, Natasha." "It is trash. Some desperate server making up drama for attention." She tossed the crumpled note into a half-full glass of champagne. The ink bled instantly, blue-black clouds swallowing the words, the evidence dissolving in real time. "Do not let some delusional server ruin your birthday." But Ethan was staring at the dissolving paper, then at Natasha, then at Claire. His expression was unreadable, calculating. And then he stood slowly, deliberately, and every conversation in the room trailed off. He walked toward Claire. The room held its breath. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Sandalwood and something darker. He was imposing, radiating controlled power. "Did you write that note?" Claire glanced at Natasha, at the murder in her eyes, at the promise of retribution. Then she looked at Ethan Blackwell and made the choice that would define her life. "Yes." "Why?" Her voice shook, but she held her ground. "Because you deserve to know the cost of trust." Silence. Ethan studied her face like he was memorizing it, like he was deciding her fate in real time. Then Gerald Patterson materialized, sweating and stammering. "Mr. Blackwell, I am so sorry. Is this employee bothering you? She will be terminated immediately." Natasha stepped forward, her voice ice. "She was harassing us, passing notes, making wild accusations. I feel threatened." Gerald's face turned purple. "Morgan, you are fired. Get out, now." "But I was just trying to—" "Out!" Claire looked at Ethan one last time, hoping, praying, waiting for him to speak, to defend her, to acknowledge the truth. But Ethan Blackwell stood silent, his face an expressionless mask, and then he did the thing that hurt more than the firing, more than the humiliation. He turned his back, took Natasha's arm, walked away. Claire felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of these people. She untied her apron with shaking hands, dropped it on the polished floor, and walked through the parted crowd. Every eye followed her, every whisper cut. She pushed through the exit into the November night. The rain was cold and punishing. It soaked through her thin uniform in seconds. But she did not run. She walked with her spine straight and her head up, even though her world had just collapsed. She had chosen integrity, and it had cost her everything. Her job, her mother's treatment, her future. For a man who could not even manage 2 words. "Thank you." 3 days later, Claire sat on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by the rubble of her life. The eviction notice, the hospital bills, the rejection emails from 6 different restaurants. Gerald had blacklisted her. Unstable. harasser of VIPs. The words followed her like a scarlet letter. She had $42 in her bank account, 3 cups of ramen noodles in her cupboard, and a mother who needed chemotherapy she could no longer afford. The static-filled television in the corner was the only sound. She had been staring at it without seeing for 20 minutes when the words finally registered. Breaking news. In a shocking development, the wedding between billionaire Ethan Blackwell and socialite Natasha Sterling has been called off. Sources say Mr. Blackwell has initiated an internal audit of Blackwell Enterprises. CFO Vincent Hayes has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Claire sat up straight. Her heart began to pound. He listened. He actually listened. The relief was dizzying. She had not been crazy. She had not destroyed her life for nothing. Ethan Blackwell had heard her desperate warning and acted on it, even if he had not saved her job, even if he had let her burn. The knock came 10 minutes later, heavy, authoritative. Not the desperate pounding of the landlord or the tentative tap of neighbors. Claire stood on shaking legs and crossed to the door. She peered through the peephole, and her world tilted. Standing in her graffiti-covered hallway, flanked by 2 men in black suits, was Ethan Blackwell, but not the polished CEO from the birthday party. This man wore a dark wool coat and jeans. His face was unshaven, his hair uncombed. He looked dangerous, focused, real. Claire opened the door. Her voice came out as a whisper. "Mr. Blackwell?" His gray eyes met hers, and in them she saw exhaustion and something else. Something that looked like respect. "May I come in, Ms. Morgan?" She stepped aside, suddenly aware of the peeling paint, the mattress on the floor, the stack of bills on the counter. He entered, and the small space seemed to shrink around his presence. He took in every detail. The poverty, the desperation, the evidence of her survival. His jaw tightened. "I owe you an apology." Claire's breath caught. "You read the note." "I did, but I could not react in the moment. Natasha is perceptive. If I had shown suspicion, she and Vincent would have destroyed every piece of evidence before I could secure it." He walked to the window, staring at the brick wall that passed for a view. "I had our security team pull the footage from Tuesday night. The Crimson Room has audio surveillance in the private booths for legal protection. I heard everything." He turned back to her, and the controlled fury in his eyes was almost frightening. "They were going to destroy my company. 15 years of work. Everything I built to prove I was different from my father. And Vincent, my best friend since college, was holding the knife." His voice dropped. "I am sorry, Claire. I had to let you get fired. I had to maintain the charade until I had the evidence. It was calculated." He paused. "But it was cruel, and you did not deserve it." Claire felt anger and understanding war in her chest. "I lost everything." "I know." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope, set it on her wobbly kitchen table. "And I am here to make it right." Claire opened the envelope. Inside was a check. $75,000. Her vision blurred. "I cannot take this. I did not do it for money." "I know. That is exactly why I am here." He stepped closer. "Everyone in my life wants something from me, Claire. Money, power, status, access. You had nothing. You risked what little you had for a stranger. That makes you the rarest thing in my world, honest." He let that word hang in the air between them. "I do not want to pay you off. I need you." Claire looked up at him. "Need me for what?" "I need someone I can trust. Someone who sees what everyone else ignores. Natasha and Vincent are gone, but the board is in chaos. I have enemies I have not identified yet. I need a covert intelligence specialist." He extended his hand. "You will attend social events as my associate. You will observe. Listen. Report what you see. People ignore the beautiful woman with the champagne glass just like they ignore the waitress. Full salary, $150,000 annually. Complete benefits. And I will cover your mother's medical expenses. Best oncologist in Manhattan. Private care. Experimental treatments if necessary. For as long as needed." Claire stared at his hand, at the lifeline being offered, at the impossibility of it all. "This is insane." Ethan smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from stone to something almost gentle. "Welcome to my world." She looked around her apartment one last time, at the eviction notice on the floor, at the hospital bills that had been drowning her for 6 years, at the poverty that had defined every choice she had ever made. Then she looked at Ethan Blackwell, at his extended hand, at the tired loneliness in his eyes that matched her own. She reached out and shook his hand. "When do I start?" "Tonight. Put on something elegant. We have a gala to infiltrate. As Claire followed Ethan Blackwell out of her apartment and into the waiting car, she left behind more than just her past. She left behind the woman who had learned to be invisible, who had swallowed her voice, who had accepted that survival meant silence. She did not know it yet, but the real danger had not even started. Natasha Sterling was not the type of woman to vanish quietly, and Claire was about to enter a world where everyone smiled while sharpening knives. A world where trust was currency and betrayal was the house that always won. But as the car pulled away from the graffiti-covered building, as Manhattan glittered through the rain-streaked windows, Claire allowed herself one moment of hope, one moment to believe that speaking up, that choosing truth over safety, might actually be the beginning of something extraordinary, even if it destroyed her first. The transformation began not with joy, but with fear. Claire Morgan sat in the back of a luxury sedan as Manhattan blurred past the windows, her hands gripping the leather seat, her mind racing through every possible way this could go wrong. Ethan Blackwell sat across from her, speaking quietly into his phone, coordinating security, lawyers, damage control. The empire he had built was under siege, and he was bringing a broke waitress into the war room. She must have been insane to say yes. The car stopped in front of a boutique on Madison Avenue. No sign, no window display, just a black door with a single brass number. Ethan opened Claire's door himself, and she stepped onto a sidewalk she would never have dared walk on before. Inside, the boutique smelled of expensive perfume and exclusivity. A woman approached. She was perhaps 50, French by her accent, with silver hair cut into a severe bob and eyes that missed nothing. "Margot," Ethan said, "this is Claire Morgan. She needs everything. Tonight." Margot circled Claire slowly, her gaze clinical. Good bone structure, terrible posture. She slouches like she is apologizing for existing. Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I have been on my feet 12 hours a day for 6 years. No excuses. We fix." Margot gestured toward a dressing area. "Come." For the next 2 hours, Claire was pulled, prodded, measured, and evaluated. Dresses were brought out and dismissed. Too formal, too young, wrong color. She tried on gowns that cost more than her annual rent, standing in front of mirrors that showed her a stranger. Finally, Margot selected a dress in deep burgundy velvet. It hugged Claire's curves without being inappropriate, fell to the floor in a way that suggested elegance rather than trying too hard. When Claire looked in the mirror, she did not recognize herself. "This is not me," she whispered. "This is a costume." Ethan's voice came from behind her. She had not heard him approach. "It is not a costume, Claire. It is armor. In my world, appearance is the first layer of defense. But what makes you dangerous is what they cannot see. Your ability to listen while invisible." She turned to face him. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are not trying to become them," he continued. "Your outsider perspective is your advantage. You notice what they ignore because you have been ignored your entire life." Something in his words steadied her. He was not ashamed of where she came from. He valued it. That realization shifted something fundamental in her chest. Margot swept Claire's hair into an elegant twist, securing it with pins that probably cost more than Claire's phone. Diamond earrings were produced, on loan from Ethan's family collection. When Claire looked in the mirror again, she saw a woman who could walk into that gala and be noticed. But she also saw the waitress underneath, the observer, the one who knew how to be invisible even when everyone was looking. In the back of the limousine, Ethan briefed her on the evening ahead. The Metropolitan Arts Foundation Gala. 500 guests, the city's elite gathering to celebrate themselves while pretending to care about art. And somewhere in that crowd, enemies Ethan had not yet identified. "Gregory Aldridge," Ethan said, showing her a photo on his phone. "Board member, 55, navy suit, silver tie tonight. I suspect he was coordinating with Vincent, but I need confirmation." "What do I do if I hear something?" "Watch who needs refills, who is nervous. Position yourself near him and listen. People ignore the beautiful woman at the bar just like they ignored you before." The limousine slowed as they approached the venue. Claire could see the red carpet through the window, the explosion of camera flashes, the reporters shouting questions. "What if they ask about my background?" "Tell partial truth. You are my consultant on organizational culture and employee relations. You conducted research on service industry dynamics." "Technically accurate," he paused. "And Claire, if anyone recognizes you from the Crimson Room, own it. Say you were conducting immersive research. Confidence sells the story." The door opened. The sound hit her first, the shouting, the questions, the chaos of media desperate for a story. Ethan, who is the mystery woman? Is Blackwell Enterprises bankrupt? Did Natasha steal company funds? Ethan's jaw tightened, but his face remained composed. He helped Claire from the car, his hand steady on hers. She felt every instinct scream at her to shrink, to hide, to disappear. But then she thought of her mother in that hospital bed, of the eviction notice on her floor, of Natasha Sterling's cold calculation. Claire straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked that red carpet like she had been doing it her entire life. The cameras exploded with light. Inside the ballroom, Claire felt like she had stepped into another world. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars, a live orchestra playing something classical and pretentious, ice sculptures melting slowly under the heat of wealth and ambition. As they entered, heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire through dry grass. Ethan leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. Stay close, but not attached. I need to work the room. See that man by the statue? Navy suit, silver tie? Yes. Gregory Aldrich. Position yourself where you can observe him. Remember your training. I have no training. Ethan's smile was brief but genuine. You have 6 years of reading tables. That is better than any spy school. He released her hand and moved into the crowd, immediately surrounded by people wanting his attention, his time, his approval. Claire stood alone in the middle of the ballroom, surrounded by strangers who inhabited a tax bracket she could not fathom. She moved to the bar, ordered sparkling water with lime, needing to stay sharp. She positioned herself near a melting ice sculpture of a peacock and pretended to admire it. Gregory Aldridge stood 15 feet away holding court with 3 other men, all expensive suits, all comfortable with power. Claire let her eyes lose focus. It was a trick she had perfected at the Crimson Room, a way of sharpening her hearing by sacrificing vision. The men's voices came into clarity. Aldridge's voice was smooth, confident. Blackwell is destabilized. The wedding cancellation proves it. Stock dropped 9 points yesterday. If we push for an emergency board vote Monday, we can remove him as CEO. One of the other men, older with white hair. Who takes over? Victor Kane is positioned. He has already acquired 23% of the company debt. Once Ethan is ousted, Kane buys the company at a fraction of value. We all receive compensation. Claire's blood turned to ice. Victor Kane. She knew that name from the business news. Ethan's biggest competitor. A man known for acquiring companies and stripping them for parts. The third man spoke, younger, nervous. What about the woman? The one Blackwell brought tonight? Aldridge laughed. It was not a kind sound. Rebound, distraction, probably some Instagram model he is using for damage control. Ignore her. She is nobody. Nobody. The word should have stung. Instead, it made Claire smile. Nobody was exactly what she needed them to think. She was about to move away, to find Ethan and report what she had heard, when the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The orchestra faltered. Conversations died. Claire turned toward the entrance, and there, framed in the doorway like a queen surveying her kingdom, was Natasha Sterling. She wore scarlet, a gown that plunged and clung and demanded attention. Her blonde hair was swept into an elaborate updo. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like victory personified. And on her arm, smiling like he had already won, was Vincent Hayes. The audacity was breathtaking. They had tried to destroy Ethan, and now they were crashing his event like conquering heroes. Claire watched Ethan freeze mid-conversation, watched his hands curl into fists, watched every muscle in his body tense for battle. Natasha spotted him and made a direct path through the parting crowd. The orchestra trailed off. 500 people held their breath. Natasha's voice carried across the silent ballroom. Ethan, darling, you look exhausted. Have you been sleeping? Ethan's voice was deadly calm. You are not welcome here, Natasha. It is a public charity event, sweetheart. I purchased a table 3 weeks ago. My money is still good. She looked past him, and her eyes found Claire. Recognition flashed across her perfect features, followed by contempt. And this is your date? The waitress from the Crimson Room? She laughed. The sound was sharp enough to cut glass. Oh, Ethan, this is tragic. You have traded a Mercedes for a bicycle. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Claire felt every eye turn to her, felt the judgment, the curiosity, the schadenfreude. This was the moment she was supposed to crumble, to confirm every assumption they had about a woman like her in a world like this. Instead, Claire stepped forward. She closed the distance between herself and Natasha Sterling, her heels clicking on marble with more confidence than she felt. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, projecting the way she had learned to when announcing specials to a crowded dining room. I might have been a waitress, Ms. Sterling, but at least I know the difference between serving food and serving lies. The silence deepened. Someone gasped. Natasha's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Claire stepped closer, close enough to see the rage building behind Natasha's perfect makeup. You talk about class, but you tried to steal a company you could not build and destroy a man you could not love. I would rather serve tables for the rest of my life than be whatever you are. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then an older woman in the corner, elegant in midnight blue, let out a sharp laugh. It was followed by another, then another. The tension broke. Not everyone was laughing, but enough were that Natasha's face flushed red beneath her foundation. You sanctimonious little... Natasha's composure cracked. Her voice rose. You have no idea what you are talking about. But there was something else in her voice now, something that sounded like pain. Claire saw it in her eyes just for a moment. A wound, old and deep. I used to be you, Natasha said, quieter now, almost to herself. The invisible girl. I worked my way up from nothing. She looked at Ethan and something like genuine emotion crossed her face. And you know what I learned? Good men like Ethan are just like the rest, just like his father. The crowd murmured. Ethan went pale. What are you talking about, he said. You do not know? Natasha's laugh was bitter. 12 years ago, I was William Blackwell's executive assistant. He promised me everything. Partnership. A future. Then when things got complicated, he gave me $30,000 and a one-way ticket to Paris. Told me to handle my problem. Tears appeared in her eyes, but her voice remained hard as diamond. I lost everything because of your family name. So do not you dare judge me for trying to take back what the Blackwells stole. The moment hung suspended. Claire felt unexpected sympathy mixed with her anger. Natasha Sterling was a victim who had become a villain. That did not excuse what she had done, but it explained it. Ethan's voice was steel. My father was a monster. I have spent 15 years trying to be different from him, and you punished me for his sins. You used my guilt against me. You are a Blackwell, Natasha spat. That is all you will ever be. Security, Ethan's voice cut through the ballroom. Escort Ms. Sterling and Mr. Hayes out immediately. Vincent started to protest as Natasha screamed as security approached. But within minutes, they were gone. The tension released. The orchestra resumed. The party continued, as parties always did when the wealthy were involved. But Claire could not shake the image of pain in Natasha's eyes. The world was more complicated than heroes and villains. Sometimes people were both. Ethan found her on the terrace. Light snow had begun to fall, dusting Manhattan in white. The city glittered below them, millions of lights, promising millions of stories. That was extraordinary, Ethan said softly. Where did that come from? Claire's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. I do not know. I just kept thinking she tried to destroy you. Someone had to stand up. Did you learn anything from Aldridge? Yes. Claire turned to face him. He is working with Victor Kane, planning an emergency board vote Monday to remove you as CEO. Kane has bought 23% of company debt. Ethan's face went hard. Victor Kane, you are certain? I heard them. 3 others were involved. They said once you are out, Kane acquires everything at basement prices. Monday is 48 hours away. Ethan looked out at the city. We need to identify which board members are vulnerable to Kane's influence. Eleanor Mitchell, the woman who laughed at Natasha, you said she runs the foundation's charitable arm. She votes with Aldridge 85% of the time. What happens to the foundation if Kane takes over? Ethan's eyes met hers. Kane's philosophy is pure profit. He would liquidate the charity within a month. Then we show Eleanor that supporting Kane destroys her legacy. She flips. Ethan stared at her with something that looked like wonder. How did you learn strategy? Claire shrugged. Managing restaurant sections during rush hour, same skills. Anticipate needs, prevent disaster, make people think it was their idea. For the first time that night, Ethan laughed. Really laughed. The sound was warm and genuine, and it made Claire's chest feel strange. The war room was not a room at all. It was Ethan's penthouse apartment, transformed overnight into Command Central. When Claire arrived Saturday morning, she found 4 lawyers already present, whiteboards covered in names and connections, laptops running financial models, coffee brewing and expensive machines. Ethan looked like he had not slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie abandoned somewhere, stubble darkening his jaw, but his eyes were sharp. Your task, he told Claire, handing her a stack of files. Find the weak links. Aldridge cannot pull this off alone. He needs allies. Find them. Claire sat on the floor, spreading files around her like she was arranging place settings. Board member profiles, voting records, financial histories, social connections. She began building a network map on paper, drawing lines between people, looking for patterns. Hours passed. Lawyers came and went. Food appeared and disappeared. The city darkened outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Claire worked through it all, her eyes burning, her back aching, but her mind sharp with purpose. At 2 in the morning, she found it. Ethan, her voice cracked from disuse. Look at this. He crossed the room, coffee cup in hand, and knelt beside her. Eleanor Mitchell's daughter works for Kane's PR firm. Started 3 months ago. That is how Kane has been grooming Eleanor, through her daughter. Ethan's hand covered his mouth. How did you find that? LinkedIn. Sometimes the simplest tools work best. By Sunday morning, most of the lawyers had gone home. Only Arthur Morrison remained, Ethan's most trusted counsel. Claire was exhausted, head resting on her arms atop a pile of documents. She felt something soft drape over her shoulders, Ethan's coat. She looked up to find him watching her, his expression unreadable. You should sleep, he said, sitting on the floor beside her, and I cannot. If Kane wins, he dissolves the medical fund, my mother's hospital. Claire, his voice was gentle, I promise you, I will pay for your mother's treatment personally, even if I lose the company, even if I am bankrupt. That is a vow. She turned to look at him. They were sitting very close. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry lines that had deepened over 3 sleepless days. Why, she whispered. I am nobody. Why do you care? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. I grew up with wealth but no warmth. My parents were cold. The company was their child, not me. I spent my whole life trying to earn love through achievement. When Natasha appeared, she played her role perfectly. Attentive, supportive, loving. I was starving for connection, so I ignored every warning sign. He looked at Claire, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her heart stutter. But you saw me in that restaurant when I was nothing but a transaction to everyone else. You risked everything you had, which was almost nothing, for a stranger. You are the first genuine person I have met in a decade. You are not just an employee, Claire. You are the first real thing that has happened to me in years. The air between them grew heavy. Name. Claire felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by gravity or something stronger. But then she pulled back. We have to survive tomorrow first. We will. But even as she returned to the files, Claire knew something fundamental had shifted between them. Something that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with 2 lonely people finding each other in the midst of chaos. Sunday afternoon, they went to Eleanor Mitchell's brownstone. The older woman received them with cool politeness that barely masked hostility. I do not appreciate surprise visits, Ethan. Consider it an intervention. Claire spread the evidence across Eleanor's dining table. Articles about Kane's past acquisitions, financial projections, a clear pattern of buying companies and immediately liquidating anything that did not generate maximum profit. Ms. Mitchell, if Mr. Kane takes control, the foundation will be dissolved within 60 days. Your 30 years of work erased. Eleanor's face remained impassive. Victor assured me the foundation would continue with increased funding. Claire slid a Forbes article across the table. This is from 2019. Quote, philanthropy is a luxury profitable companies cannot afford. Efficiency means cutting emotional spending. Those are Victor Kane's words. Eleanor read. Her face went pale. Her hands began to shake. He lied, she whispered. Gregory Aldridge lied, Ethan corrected. Kane is using him. Eleanor looked up, and Claire saw tears in her eyes. I built that program from nothing. We have provided arts education to 15,000 underserved children. I know, Claire's voice was gentle. My mother volunteers at Mercy General because your foundation funded her treatment. You saved her life, and you are about to save thousands more by standing with truth. Eleanor stared at Claire, really saw her. You are the woman from the restaurant. The note. Yes, ma'am. And he hired you after you were fired for helping him. Best decision I have made in years, Ethan said quietly. Eleanor wiped her eyes. If I vote against removal, will you guarantee foundation protection? I will establish it as an independent nonprofit. You will have complete board control, protected from any corporate restructuring. In writing. Eleanor stood, extended her hand. Then you have my vote. And I will bring Michael O'Brien and Rebecca Sullivan. That is 3 votes. That is enough to block the vote. As they left, Eleanor pulled Claire aside. Thank you for speaking up. Most people protect themselves. Someone had to, Claire said simply. Monday morning arrived with cruel clarity. Claire was in her new office at Blackwell Enterprises, organizing materials for the 10 o'clock board meeting. They had the votes. They would survive this. She should have felt confident. Then her desk phone rang. The voice was distorted, electronic. Ms. Morgan, check your email. We know about your mother, your father, your debts. All of it. The line went dead. Claire's hands shook as she opened her email. Anonymous sender. Subject line, the real Claire Morgan. Inside were documents. Police reports showing drug arrests that never happened. Photos of her with needles, clearly photoshopped but convincing. Bank statements showing a $120,000 deposit from Kane Industries dated the day before she passed Ethan the note. A psychological evaluation diagnosing her with narcissistic personality disorder. The narrative was perfect. Claire Morgan was a corporate spy, planted by Kane to seduce Ethan, break up his engagement, destabilize his judgment, and feed insider information to his competitor. The poor waitress story was just cover. Attached was a press release scheduled to publish at 9:45, 15 minutes before the board meeting. The headline, Waitress Whistleblower Exposed as Industrial Spy. Blackwell duped by Kane Plant. Claire grabbed the printouts and ran to Ethan's office. He was buttoning his jacket, preparing for battle. He saw her face and his expression darkened. What is it? She handed him the papers. Watched him read. Watched fury transform his features. This is fabricated, obviously. It does not matter. Claire's voice shook. It fits the story. Makes you look weak. Manipulated twice. If this publishes before the meeting, Aldridge wins. The board loses faith. She took a breath. You have to fire me, publicly, right now, before the meeting. Tell the board you discovered the fraud yourself and handled it decisively. It shows control. Absolutely not. Ethan, please, think about the 3,000 employees. If Kane takes over, mass layoffs. My reputation is nothing compared to that. Ethan slammed his hand on the desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Your reputation is everything because you are the only honest person in this entire building. I will not throw you to the wolves. He ripped the papers in half. I am done playing defense. You are coming to that boardroom with me. We tell them everything, the truth. But before Claire could respond, his office doors crashed open. Police officers, 4 of them. And behind them, smiling like he had already won, was Vincent Hayes. Officers, Vincent said, pointing at Claire. That is her, the woman who embezzled $75,000 from corporate accounts. The evidence is documented. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. The check, Ethan's personal check. Vincent had manipulated the ledger to make it look like corporate theft. Ms. Morgan, you are under arrest for grand larceny. The detective stepped forward with handcuffs. Ethan moved between them, a wall of barely controlled rage. Do not touch her. That money came from my personal trust, not company funds. Vincent's smile was poisonous. According to the audited ledger, it came from the operational slush fund, which makes it embezzlement. And since you authorized it, Ethan, it makes you either an accomplice or an incompetent fool. Board members were gathering in the hallway, drawn by the commotion. Gregory Aldridge stood there, smiling. First Natasha, now a criminal, Aldridge announced loudly. The CEO clearly lacks judgment. We need that emergency vote immediately. The detective approached Claire with handcuffs. Cold metal clicked around her wrists. She looked at Ethan. He looked ready to kill. But if he fought the police, he would be arrested too. The company would fall instantly. Do not fight this, Claire said calmly. If you are arrested, it is over. Win the vote. Get me out later. Claire. His voice broke on her name. Win. That is an order. As they led her away in handcuffs, past sneering Aldridge and triumphant Vincent, past the board members already whispering judgment, Claire kept her head high. She refused to crumble, because Vincent Hayes had made a fatal mistake. He thought he was dealing with a waitress who would fold under pressure. He forgot she had survived 6 years on scraps and grit, and he forgot to check if she still had the one thing that mattered. In her blazer pocket, small and cold and full of Vincent's confession, was a USB drive she had stolen at the gala. The insurance policy he did not know he had lost. The war had moved from the boardroom to the holding cell. But Claire Morgan had already won. Vincent just did not know it yet. The holding cell smelled of industrial cleaner and broken dreams. Claire Morgan sat on a metal bench that was bolted to concrete, her wrists still aching where the handcuffs had been. They had taken her phone, her purse, her shoelaces, anything that could be used as a weapon or an escape. But they had not found the USB drive. It was still there, a small silver rectangle pressed against her ribs in the inner pocket of her blazer. She had palmed it the moment the police entered Ethan's office. A sleight of hand perfected during 6 years of sneaking extra bread, rolls to hungry children when managers were not looking. Vincent Hayes had searched for evidence of his own crimes and found nothing because he had assumed Claire was just a waitress, just a nobody. He had forgotten that invisible people see everything, and they learn to hold on to what matters. The door opened. A detective entered, middle-aged and tired-looking, carrying a folder that probably contained the fabricated evidence Vincent had prepared. Detective Walsh. His badge said his first name was Michael. Miss Morgan. He sat across from her, the metal chair scraping against concrete. You want to tell me your side of the story? Claire met his eyes. She had learned long ago that lying required looking away, and she had nothing to hide. The money was not embezzled. It was a personal gift from Ethan Blackwell. If you check the bank routing numbers, you will find it came from his private trust, not corporate accounts. Walsh studied her. According to the internal ledger at Blackwell Enterprises, it came from operational funds. Then the ledger was manipulated. Vincent Hayes has administrative access to accounting systems. He altered it to frame me. The detective leaned back. You seem pretty calm for someone facing 5 to 10 years. Because I am innocent, and the people who frame me are about to learn what happens when you underestimate the invisible. Before Walsh could respond, the door opened again. A man in an expensive gray suit entered, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a distinguished nose. He carried a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Claire's entire wardrobe had before Saturday. Detective Walsh, I am Arthur Morrison, counsel for Ms. Morgan. Mr. Blackwell retained me. He set the briefcase on the table with a decisive click, and I have documentation that will resolve this matter immediately. He pulled out bank transfer receipts, trust documents, wire confirmations. Spread them across the table like playing cards in a winning hand. The routing numbers do not match any corporate account at Blackwell Enterprises. This was a personal transaction from Mr. Blackwell's family trust. The internal ledger was falsified. I have sworn affidavits from 3 independent auditors confirming this discrepancy. Walsh reviewed the documents, his expression shifting from skepticism to resignation. He sighed the way cops do when they realize they have been used as pawns in someone else's game. I will release you pending further investigation. But Ms. Morgan, do not leave the city. Claire stood, her legs steadier than they should have been. I need to get to Blackwell Enterprises, right now. Claire, Arthur said carefully, you have been arrested. The optics are terrible. You should go home, lie low, let Ethan handle the board meeting. She pulled the USB drive from her pocket, held it up in the fluorescent light. No, Vincent is not just framing me. He is selling the company today, and I have proof. Arthur's eyes widened. What is that? Vincent's insurance policy. He kept his confession on a drive in his jacket pocket. I took it at the gala. She looked at the wall clock. 9:42. The board meeting started at 10. We have 18 minutes. My car is outside. Let's move. Midtown Manhattan traffic on a Monday morning was a special kind of hell. Arthur's Mercedes sat trapped behind a delivery truck, surrounded by taxis playing a violent game of musical lanes, construction barriers funneling 3 lanes into one. The dashboard clock seemed to move faster than the car. 9:48, 9:51, 9:54. We are not going to make it, Arthur said, his usual composure cracking. Claire stared out the window. They were 3 blocks from Blackwell Enterprises. 3 blocks that might as well have been 3 miles. She could see the tower in the distance, glass and steel cutting into the gray November sky. Inside that building, Ethan was fighting for his company, his legacy, everything he had built to prove he was different from his father. And she had the evidence that could save him. 3 blocks. She made a decision that was either brilliant or insane. Stop the car. What? Claire opened the door. I am running. You cannot run in those heels. She kicked them off, left them on the floor of the Mercedes like Cinderella fleeing the ball. Then she stepped out into the November cold in bare feet and started to run. Behind her, she heard Arthur shouting. Ahead of her, she heard the city, the honking horns, the construction, the symphony of Manhattan at rush hour. The pavement was cold and wet from morning rain. Grit bit into her soles, but Claire had spent 6 years standing on her feet for 12-hour shifts. Pain was an old friend. She ran. The pencil skirt was not designed for sprinting. She grabbed the hem and yanked it up to her thighs, not caring who saw, not caring about dignity or decorum or any of the rules that governed the world she had entered. She ran past businessmen checking their phones, past street vendors selling coffee, past tourists who stopped to stare at the woman in a business suit running barefoot through Midtown like her life depended on it. Because it did, not just her life. Ethan's. 3,000 employees. Eleanor's foundation. All of it balanced on whether she could cover 3 blocks in 8 minutes. 9:56. Her lungs burned. The cold air ripped through her chest with every breath. A stitch formed in her side, sharp and insistent. Her feet were numb, which was probably a blessing because she did not want to know what the pavement was doing to them. She stumbled once, her hands shooting out to catch herself on a streetlight. A businessman reached to help her, concern on his face, but she pushed past him. No time. No time. 9:58. The tower was ahead, glass doors reflecting the gray sky. She could see the lobby through them, could see James Kowalski, the security guard, standing at his post. Claire hit the revolving door at full speed, nearly crashing through it. She burst into the lobby, leaving wet, bloody footprints on marble that probably cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. James turned, his hand instinctively going to his radio. "Ms. Morgan, you are not supposed to be here. I got orders that you were arrested." Claire staggered to his desk, gasping, unable to form words. She held up the USB drive like a talisman, like a holy relic that could perform miracles. "Call Ethan," she managed between breaths. "Tell him I have the evidence. Please, James." The old security guard looked at her, really looked at her, saw the desperation, the bloody feet, the way she was swaying from exhaustion but still standing. James Kowalski had worked security for 30 years. He knew the difference between criminals and heroes, and he knew that sometimes they looked exactly the same until the story played out. He made his choice. 50th floor, go. He swiped his master badge. The elevator unlocked with a beep that sounded like salvation. Claire stumbled inside and slammed her hand on the button for the 50th floor. As the doors closed and the elevator began its ascent, she allowed herself one moment to lean against the wall and close her eyes. One moment to acknowledge that her feet were screaming, her lungs were on fire, and she had just run through Manhattan barefoot like a woman possessed. Then she opened her eyes, straightened her spine, and prepared for war. The elevator doors opened on chaos. The 50th floor was all glass and chrome designed to intimidate. Executive offices lined the perimeter, and at the far end, through transparent walls, Claire could see the boardroom, could see Ethan standing at the head of a long table surrounded by people who wanted to destroy him. She walked toward the boardroom doors, her bloody footprints stark against white marble. Executives in the hallway stopped to stare. Assistants gasped. Someone reached for a phone, probably to call security, but Claire did not stop, could not stop. Inside the boardroom, she could see it playing out like a nightmare in slow motion. Gregory Aldridge was standing, a triumphant smile on his face. Board members had their hands raised, voting. Eleanor Mitchell looked pained, conflicted. Ethan stood alone at the head of the table, his shoulders set with the kind of defeat that comes not from losing, but from being betrayed by everyone you trusted. Claire reached the double doors. They were heavy, designed to be imposing, to separate the powerful from everyone else. She grabbed both handles and threw her weight against them. The doors crashed open with a sound like thunder. Every head in the boardroom turned. The vote froze mid-count, and there, framed in the doorway, like an avenging angel risen from hell itself, stood Claire Morgan. Her hair had come loose from its elegant twist. It hung in wet tangles around her face. Her burgundy blazer was soaked with sweat and rain. Her white blouse clung to her ribs, and her feet, bare and bloody, left prints on the pristine carpet. She looked like she had fought her way through the apocalypse, and in a way, she had. "Claire," Ethan breathed her name like a prayer. Vincent Hayes jumped to his feet. "Security, she is a criminal. She should not be here." Claire walked to the center of the boardroom. Every step left a mark. Every mark was a testament to how far she had come and what it had cost. She stopped at the table, facing them all. 12 board members, 3 lawyers, Vincent Hayes with his smug superiority, Gregory Aldridge with his comfortable corruption, and Ethan Blackwell with hope dawning in his exhausted eyes. "I am not a criminal, Vincent." Her voice was steady despite her breathlessness. "But you are." She placed the silver USB drive on the mahogany table. It landed with a small click that echoed in the silence. "This is your personal backup drive, the one you labeled insurance policy. I think the board should hear what is on it before you finalize that vote." Vincent's face went from smug to pale in the space between heartbeats. Do not touch that. That is stolen property. But Ethan was already moving. He crossed the boardroom in 3 strides and physically blocked Vincent's lunge for the drive, grabbed him by the shoulder, and shoved him back into his chair with barely restrained violence. Sit down. The command in Ethan's voice could have stopped armies. He picked up the USB drive, looked at Claire, and in his eyes she saw everything he could not say in front of the board. Gratitude, wonder, something that looked dangerously close to love. What am I looking for, he asked. File labeled Kane Final Agreement, audio file. Ethan plugged the drive into the presentation system. The screens around the boardroom flickered to life, showing the file directory. He clicked the file. For 3 seconds, there was only static. Then Vincent Hayes' voice filled the room, crystal clear and damning. Do not worry, Victor. I have manipulated the construction division's books. The quarterly report will show catastrophic losses. Stock tanks by Friday. You can acquire at $8 per share, 90% below current value. Another voice, deeper, older. Victor Kane himself. And Blackwell, what if he investigates? Vincent's laugh was cold and calculated. Ethan is soft, always has been. I have got a disposable waitress playing distraction. I will frame her for embezzlement. Discredits his judgment. While he is playing white knight, we will gut the company from the inside. The board? Aldridge is cheap, bought him for $750,000. Fitzgerald needs time for his daughter's legal fees. I am covering it. 3 others are compromised through various means. They will vote however I tell them. In the charity wing, the foundation Eleanor Mitchell built, Vincent's voice was dismissive. First thing we liquidate, it bleeds $12 million annually on feel-good nonsense. Kane Industries does not do charity. We do profit. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a world breaking apart, of foundations crumbling, of mass falling away to reveal the rot beneath. Every eye in the room turned to Gregory Aldridge. The board member's face had gone from ruddy confidence to ash gray. His hands trembled on the table. That is fabricated, he stammered. That is AI, deep fake technology. You can fake anything now. Eleanor Mitchell stood. She was 62 years old, had served on the board for 20 years, and she looked like she wanted to reach across the table and strangle Aldridge with her bare hands. It is real, Gregory. Her voice shook with fury. The metadata shows it was recorded 8 days ago at the Crimson Room. I can see the timestamp. I can see the location data. She turned to Vincent. You were going to destroy the foundation. 30 years of my work, 15,000 children's futures. For what? For money you could never spend in 3 lifetimes? Vincent was no longer smirking. He looked like a rat in a trap, eyes darting toward the exits, calculating whether he could run. He made his decision and bolted. He made it 3 steps before security tackled him. 2 guards in black suits brought him down like linebackers hitting a quarterback. Vincent hit the carpet hard, the air leaving his lungs in a whoosh. They wrenched his arms behind his back, and Claire heard the distinctive click of handcuffs. Real ones this time. Not the theatrical arrests Vincent had orchestrated for her. These were permanent. Thomas Fitzgerald stood, his face pale. Vincent approached me about my daughter's legal troubles. Offered to help if I voted his way on some issues. I did not know the full scope. I swear, Ethan, I did not know he was trying to destroy everything. Aldridge was trying to edge toward the door. Eleanor stepped in front of him, all 5 feet 3 inches of righteous fury. Sit down, Gregory. You are not going anywhere. Ethan looked around the table at the remaining board members. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. I believe we need to retake that vote. Eleanor's hand shot up. I move to table the vote of no confidence indefinitely, and I further move to remove Vincent Hayes from all positions and initiate criminal proceedings. Michael O'Brien, the board member with white hair who had been part of Aldridge's conversation at the gala, raised his hand. Seconded. All in favor? Every hand went up except Aldridge's. Even Fitzgerald voted yes, trying to salvage what remained of his dignity. Motion carries unanimously. Ethan turned to security. Take Mr. Hayes into custody, and someone call the FBI. I believe they will want to have a conversation with him. As security dragged Vincent away, he thrashed and shouted. Gone was the sophisticated CFO. What remained was a desperate man watching his carefully constructed world collapse. Ethan, please, we were friends. I did not mean for it to go this far. I was just trying to secure my future. Ethan's voice was cold as a January wind. Friends do not betray. Goodbye, Vincent. The FBI arrived within an hour, Claire watched from Ethan's office as federal agents in dark suits swarmed the building. Arthur Morrison had called them the moment the recording finished, and they had been waiting for exactly this kind of evidence. The USB drive contained more than just the audio file. There were spreadsheets documenting 4 years of systematic theft, emails coordinating with Victor Kane on timing and stock manipulation, wire transfer records showing money flowing to offshore accounts. Vincent Hayes had been meticulous in his crime, keeping detailed records like a man who believed he was untouchable. He had stolen $63 million from the pension fund, from the charity accounts, from infrastructure projects that were supposed to upgrade technology for underserved schools. He had taken money meant to help people and funneled it into his own pockets. Gregory Aldridge tried to negotiate immunity, tried to claim he was just following Vincent's lead. But the recording was clear. He had known. He had participated. He had sold out his responsibilities for $750,000. Federal prosecutors were not interested in deals. By evening, the news was everywhere, every network, every website, the scandal of the decade. Billionaire CEO nearly destroyed by his own CFO. Waitress turned corporate spy turned hero. The story had everything. Betrayal, romance, justice, redemption. Claire watched it unfold from Ethan's office, sitting on his leather sofa wrapped in a blanket someone had found. A paramedic had cleaned and bandaged her feet. 12 stitches total. They would heal. Everything would heal, given time. Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the last of the FBI vehicles depart. The sun was setting, painting Manhattan in shades of gold and crimson. He had not said much since the board meeting ended. Claire wondered what he was thinking, if he regretted bringing her into his world, if he was calculating how quickly he could return to normalcy now that the threat was neutralized. Then he turned and crossed the office, sat on the coffee table in front of her, bringing himself to her eye level, took the mug of tea from her hands and set it aside. Then he took her hand in his, and his touch was gentle and sure. You ran barefoot through Manhattan in November. I had to. You saved everything, the company, 3,000 shoes, Eleanor's foundation, probably a dozen other initiatives Vincent would have dismantled. He paused. You saved me. I just told the truth. You did more than that. You risked your freedom, your safety. You ran until your feet bled. His voice dropped to a whisper. We are. Claire looked at their joined hands, at the contrast between his manicured nails and her bitten ones, at the expensive watch on his wrist and the absence of any jewelry on hers. They came from different worlds. But in this moment, that did not seem to matter. Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because you built a hospital wing that saved my mother's life. Because you are trying to be good in a world that rewards being cruel. She met his eyes. Because you deserve someone who will run through fire for you, and I did not have fire. I just had pavement. Something in Ethan's expression shifted, softened. I need to tell you something. What? I'm letting you go. Claire felt her heart drop. Of course, the danger was over. He did not need a covert intelligence consultant anymore. She had been useful, and now she was not. This was always how it would end. She started to pull her hands away, but he held on. Wait, let me finish. She stopped, confused. I am terminating your position as my consultant, effective immediately. The words hit like stones. Claire fought to keep her expression neutral. She had known this was coming, had known that fairy tales did not happen to girls from Queens. But knowing and feeling were different countries, and the journey between them hurt more than her feet. Because I am offering you a different position, Ethan continued. His voice was steady, but his eyes were vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. What position? She managed. Partner. Claire's breath caught. You mean business partner? Like COO or something? Ethan shook his head slowly. Life partner. The world stopped. Manhattan disappeared. The office disappeared. Everything disappeared except Ethan Blackwell holding her hands and looking at her like she was the answer to every question he had been too afraid to ask. Claire Morgan. I have billions of dollars. Skyscrapers, power. I have everything that is supposed to matter. His voice was rough with emotion. But until you walked into my life, I was the loneliest man in New York, surrounded by people and utterly alone. I do not want to run this company without you. I do not want to wake up without you. I do not want to face another day unless you are beside me. He paused, and the next words came out barely above a whisper. Not as my employee, as my equal, my partner, my wife. Tears spilled over Claire's lashes. Ethan, we are from different worlds. The media will call me a gold digger, another Natasha. They will say I seduced you for money. Let them talk. Fierceness entered his voice. I know the truth. You are the bravest, most honest person I have ever met. You saw me when no one else did. You risked everything for a stranger. You ran barefoot through a city to save people you barely knew. His voice broke. I love you, Claire Morgan. The tears came freely now. I love you too. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was not tentative. It was not uncertain. It was the kiss of a man who had spent 38 years searching for something real and had finally found it in the most unexpected place. It was the kiss of a woman who had been invisible her entire life and was finally being seen. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Marry me. Yes. It was the easiest decision Claire had ever made. 1 year later, the Wall Street Journal ran a story about Blackwell Enterprises' record-breaking profits under its new co-leadership structure. But the article included a photograph that had nothing to do with boardrooms or quarterly earnings. It showed a wedding. The ceremony took place in the private garden of the Morgan Foundation for Medical Research. The foundation occupied what had once been the oncology wing of Mercy General Hospital. Ethan had renamed it after Claire's mother, who sat in the front row wearing a lavender dress and crying happy tears. She had been cancer-free for 18 months. The guest list was small, carefully curated. No celebrities looking for photo opportunities. No politicians angling for donations. Just people who mattered. James Kowalski, who had risked his job to let Claire into that building, now served as head of security for the entire company. Eleanor Mitchell dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief and smiled at the young woman who had saved her life's work. Arthur Morrison, who almost never smiled, smiled. Margot Dupont, the stylist who had transformed a waitress into a warrior, brought French tissues that cost more than most people's rent. Claire wore a simple ivory gown. No elaborate train, no cathedral veil, just clean lines and elegant simplicity. Her hair was loose around her shoulders because Ethan had asked her to wear it that way. Said he liked when she was herself rather than trying to be what the world expected. The officiant was a federal judge Ethan had known for years. She smiled at the couple standing before her. Claire and Ethan, you have faced betrayal. You have faced doubt. You have faced destruction, and you chose truth. You chose courage. You chose each other, for that is the foundation of forever. They exchanged rings, simple platinum bands, no diamonds, no ostentation, just metal and promises. You may kiss your bride. Ethan cupped Claire's face in his hands and kissed her like he had been given permission to breathe after a lifetime of holding his breath. The applause was warm and genuine. As they walked back down the aisle hand in hand, Claire looked at the people gathered. Her mother, healthy and beaming, the security guard who had believed in her, the lawyer who had defended her, the board member she had saved, the stylist who had armored her. This was her family now, chosen rather than born, built from trust rather than blood. The reception was held in the foundation's main hall, surrounded by photographs of the children whose lives had been changed by the programs Eleanor had built and Claire now helped run. Because that was Claire's new role. Co-CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, yes. But more importantly, director of the foundation that bore her mother's name. She had instituted new programs, scholarships for service industry workers wanting to change careers, emergency funds for families facing medical bankruptcy, mentorship programs pairing successful professionals with kids from underserved communities. She had taken everything she learned from being invisible and used it to help people who were still living in those shadows. Forbes had put her on their 30 under 30 list. Fast Company called her one of the most creative people in business. But the recognition Claire valued most came from a letter she received 3 months after the wedding. It was from a 19-year-old girl in Queens who had used a Morgan Foundation scholarship to attend community college. The girl wrote, I was a waitress. I thought that was all I could ever be. Then I read about you, about how you went from serving tables to running a company. You made me believe I could be more. Thank you for being visible so I could believe in invisible people like me. Claire kept that letter in her desk drawer. On hard days, when imposter syndrome whispered that she did not belong in this world of power and wealth, she would read it and remember. She belonged because she had earned it, because she had run barefoot through the cold, because she had chosen truth over safety, because she had refused to stay invisible when speaking up could save lives. Every year on their anniversary, Claire and Ethan maintained a tradition that began on their first anniversary and would continue for the rest of their lives. They cleared their penthouse of staff, sent the housekeeper home, dismissed the security that usually lurked discreetly in corners. They wanted to be alone. Claire put on an apron, not for cooking, though that would come later. She put it on because it reminded her of where she came from, of the woman she had been before barefoot sprints and boardroom battles. Ethan opened a bottle of wine, not because they needed alcohol, but because the ritual mattered. He poured 2 glasses while Claire prepared dinner. Always steak, always the kind that had cost more than her weekly salary at the Crimson Room. They sat at the kitchen island, not the formal dining table that could seat 20, just the two of them in the warm light of their home, and they raised their glasses. To Booth 9, Ethan said. To 3 words that changed everything, Claire responded. They clinked glasses and drank. Then they laughed, and the sound filled the space with warmth. Later they would eat. Later they would talk about their days, about the company, about the foundation, about the child they were planning to start trying for in the spring. Later they would make love and fall asleep tangled together. Two people who had found each other in the wreckage of betrayal and built something beautiful from the ruins. But in this moment, they simply sat together. A billionaire CEO and the waitress who had saved him. A woman who had been invisible and the man who had learned to see. Partners in every sense that mattered. On the wall of Blackwell Enterprises headquarters, 2 portraits hung side by side. Ethan Blackwell, founder and co-CEO. Claire Morgan Blackwell, co-CEO and director, Morgan Foundation. Beneath her portrait was a plaque that visitors often stopped to photograph. She taught us to see the invisible, hear the silenced, and value the overlooked. True leadership begins with listening. Employees walked past those portraits every day. Some saw the fairy tale, the waitress who became a queen, the Cinderella story for the modern age. But others saw something more. They saw proof that courage mattered. That truth had power. That one person speaking up could change everything. Claire would sometimes stand in the lobby and watch people read that plaque. Watch their expressions shift as they absorbed the words. She wondered how many of them felt invisible in their own lives. How many were waiting for permission to speak up, to run barefoot through the storm, to choose truth even when it cost everything. She hoped the plaque gave them courage. The same way Ethan's photograph had given her courage in those dark days when survival required silence. The world needed more people willing to run through fire, through cold pavement, through fear and doubt and the crushing weight of impossible odds. Because sometimes 3 words could dismantle an empire. Sometimes a note passed in secret could save thousands of lives. Sometimes the invisible people were the ones who saw most clearly. And sometimes, just sometimes, choosing truth over safety could lead not to destruction, but to everything you never knew you needed. Claire Morgan had been nobody. A waitress with $734.56 in her bank account. A woman so invisible that people looked through her like she was made of glass. But she had learned something that changed her life and the lives of everyone around her. She learned that the most powerful people in the world are not those who demand to be seen. They are the ones who choose to see others, who listen when everyone else ignores, who speak up when silence would be safer. Claire had spoken up. She had run barefoot through Manhattan with bloody feet and desperate hope. She had thrown a grenade into her own life and watched the explosion reshape her entire world. And in the end, she had not just survived, she had won. Not because she became wealthy or powerful, though those things came. She won because she stayed true to the values her mother had taught her on a Christmas morning when her father walked away. She won because she could look at herself in the mirror and live with what she saw. She won because when the world asked her to be invisible, to stay silent, to accept injustice for the sake of survival, she had made a different choice. She had chosen to be seen, to speak truth, to run through fire. And sometimes when you run barefoot through the storm, when you refuse to be invisible anymore, when you choose courage over comfort, the universe rewards you not just with survival, but with something extraordinary. Claire Morgan had started as nobody, but she had become someone who changed the world simply by refusing to disappear. That was the real fairy tale, not the dress or the diamonds or the penthouse with the view, but the truth that invisible people, the ones the world overlooks and underestimates, are often the ones with the clearest vision, the strongest hearts, the deepest courage, and sometimes, just sometimes, they are the ones who save everyone else. The end.